too.
Okay, so we're gonna make the whipped cream filling inside, and I've already pre-made a whipped cream. It would look like this at the end result, but we're gonna make a chocolate filling for this. So what we're gonna do is take a heavy whipping cream. I prefer heavy whipping cream because it has a higher consistency, so it's thicker when you whip it. And so we're just gonna open this. If it'll open, open. Okay, so you're gonna open it and then put it into a blender. Of course, if you don't have one of these, you can also use a hand whisk, or if you really don't have one, use a fork. So just add it in here. Okay, not so furiously, so it doesn't spill everywhere. And so to make this whipped cream, it's really easy. It takes pretty much 3 ingredients. You take the whipped cream, sugar, vanilla, and that's usually what you do to make a regular one. Now for this one, we're gonna be using whipped cream, powdered sugar, regular sugar, cocoa powder, and vanilla. So what we're gonna do is add the vanilla extract, and I usually just use a cow because that's just how I roll. So use that. I'm gonna add a little bit more. Give it a flavor. Okay. So then just close that up. And then we're gonna add the cocoa powder. So cocoa powder has a really thick consistency, as I mentioned earlier. So you're gonna want to be careful with how much you use. But see, there's not much in here, so I'd say at most a tablespoon is in here. So I'm just gonna empty that in there. And you can just use whatever brand of cocoa powder you have. This is what I had at home. We also have the unsweet version. It just depends on your flavor and taste buds for the amount of sweetness in cocoa. And so what we need next is a tablespoon of sugar. Because this is about, I'd say, about a cup of heavy whipping cream, we're going to want 1 tablespoon of sugar. So sugar, right? Okay, sugar. 1 tablespoon of sugar. And then, because I like a thicker consistency whenever I make whipped cream, I use a tablespoon of powdered sugar as well. And you don't have to use powdered sugar. It makes the whipped cream is still pretty thick, but this just makes it a lot thicker. And so, if the consistency is not to your liking or whatnot, you can always replace the powdered sugar with sugar. And if it's not sweet enough, because powdered sugar is a lot less sweet to regular sugar, you can add more sugar if you want to. So we're just going to blend this. So because we're working with cocoa powder here, what I'm going to do is take a spatula and actually blend in by hand a little bit better, because it's a little different consistency. So notice how we only added a little bit of cocoa powder earlier, so that was definitely not enough. So what we're going to do is add more cocoa powder to our liking. So since this is empty now, that's good. We're going to take the unsweetened version. Of course, once again, you can use whatever kind you like, or what you have at home. You could technically use chocolate, but it has a completely different consistency to cocoa powder, so it'll turn out completely different, and it'll be a lot harder when you eat the whipped cream. So I highly recommend using cocoa powder. I mean, cocoa powder you can get at your standard market for, say, this thing was about $2. So. And we're just going to add another tablespoon. And just sprinkle this over. And then before we blend it, we're going to mix it around a little bit, just so that it evens out. Okay. And then just wipe your spatula along this to get the excess out. Okay, and then we're just going to continue blending. Okay, so you notice how there's like little bubbles forming around all the little chunks of the cocoa powder? We're going to want to go around and just squish it so that it blends in well. Because if it forms into, if you keep these little bubbles inside, they're just going to make it into little chunks of cocoa powder, and I don't know if you like having a liquor taste in your mouth when you eat whipped cream. Of course, some people might like that, but for our purpose, we're not going to do that. So, just go around and squish up the cocoa powder. Okay, and then you're just going to want to squish it down. Okay, so once again, we start blending again. Okay, so you want to be able to get it to like a nice thick consistency, and by the looks of this is pretty thick. What you want to be able to do is that so take your spatula, if you're able to basically slide it off and it feels like there's something resisting against it, then that is what you want for the consistency. And at this point you can always add more sugar, or this is a pretty good amount of cocoa powder in here, so any more and it's going to be too much. So yeah, after this you just put it into the filling or the outside part of your Yule Log to your liking. And usually you can do this step while the cake is baking, or if you do it prior to or way after, because the cake still needs to cool down, you can just stick this in the refrigerator. It'll get strong, it'll get even thicker if you stick it in the refrigerator.